I've seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dreams some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings
We've been having some technical difficulties, I understand, and this is Dr. George Simon welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. I hope our technical issues have been resolved. And I want to welcome you to a special edition of Character Matters, an edition that we don't really like to remember all that well. A date that we don't like to remember all that well. Doing my best to try and resolve our technical problems while I'm speaking. So give me a moment's pause here while I do that, and let's see what's going on here. I think we have our problems resolved. At least I hope so. My producer was telling me that we had some audio difficulty, and it looks like we had about 3 minutes or so of dead air. I apologize for that. It's been kind of a rough day, this 15-year anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center and the other attacks that were aborted or were foiled at least in some way. That day could have been perhaps even worse a tragedy were it not for the heroic efforts of some to prevent yet another plane, from striking other government buildings, maybe even the United States Capitol or the White House. It's sobering to think about just how methodical and just how determined the attackers were to inflict great damage. And it's something we also forget, I think, at times, and that is that whether we like it or not, we are in a state of war that was declared by another entity against our country. And this was just one of the many acts of that war. And I don't want to get into too big a political discussion about all of the underlying reasons for it. But it is something we have to ponder because I think in many ways it was a wake-up call. There was a time, in the not too distant past, there was a time when not only were we as a country the envy of many other countries, but we also served as a beacon. We also served as a model for what could happen when people were afforded maximum freedom and where folks were of a character to preserve and defend individual rights. But that ideal has often been tarnished throughout our history by some of our actions. There have been those among us who have brought shame among us from time to time. There have been those times in our histories when in our history where we've done some pretty awful things to various groups of people. And some of those injustices still exist. It's not so much the physical land that America represents, because this land was inhabited by others long before it was colonized by the Europeans who brought us a lot of what we know in our culture and politics. It's not so much the physical land, and it's not so much even some of the laws and principles upon which the country was founded, because some of those laws, frankly, discriminated against women, for example, and against non-property holders. It's not so much any of that. What it's always been about is the idea of America, the ideals that we profess, and that we have not always lived up to. And of course, living out those ideals always depends upon character. Character is what matters, and it's ultimately what will save us. Which is why I write about it and speak about it. That's what we need more than anything else. We need to make character matter again. And presently we're in a great debate. On the political stage about who will lead us over the next 4 years, who will guide us, who will set the tone and the direction, who will set the agenda. And I can't remember a time being this disheartened and this depressed about the choice that we face. The only bright spot that I can see, and that I've mentioned on a couple of the national appearances that I've made in the last few months, the only real bright spot that I can see is that the message seems to be coming through loud and clear to more and more people how much character just absolutely has to matter, and what kind of trouble we face because we face the prospect of electing one of the offerings that we have of such poor character to the highest office in the land. We will, in the end, get the government that we deserve. And it should continue to send us a message about the important problem we face. Maybe we will resolve never again. Some people have resolved that in their own hearts and minds over the attacks that occurred 15 years ago today. They don't want to see anything like that again. We have all these programs and entities that we've put into place, from the Department of Homeland Security to secret cyber spying agencies, to all these things that we've done to try and protect ourselves from terrorist attacks. Wouldn't it be nice if we resolved to never again put ourselves in the position to have to face the kind of abysmal choice that we're facing this year? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be nice to think that we could actually trust someone to tell us the truth, even when it's not pretty? To not try to manipulate us, to not put their own skin and their own interests ahead of ours. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to know in your own heart that you are voting for somebody of truly admirable, noble character, somebody you would want your children to emulate, to follow the lead of? We have it within our power to make character really matter again. We have to start early with our children. We have to not just teach them right from wrong. We have to first know what's truly right and what's truly wrong, to teach that. But more importantly, we have to help them see the bigger picture, to get beyond themselves, to see this entire enterprise that we call life, and to do their part to nurture it, as opposed to inadvertently, or perhaps even deliberately, playing a part in its demise. We have that power. We're the ones with the brains, the ones that through evolution have emerged at the top of the food chain. We have all this capability. On the money, with the money that we have spent trying to butcher one another, we could have already completely ended, world poverty and hunger. It's a sobering thought, is it not? What do you suppose it would take? What do you suppose it would take for us to appreciate the supreme importance of what we so rarely pay attention to? You know, it wouldn't dishearten me in the least if there were marches in the street protesting this pathetic choice that we face. I'm a child of the 60s. I remember protests in the streets. I remember marches for all kinds of causes, especially civil rights. It's a sad, sad day in America for a lot of reasons. Today we remember the fallen on September 11th, 2001. The song that you hear open and close the program is a song my wife and I wrote not for the purposes of that fateful day. It wasn't a 9/11 song. It was an inspirational tune designed to usher in the new millennium and inspire people to honor personally, to take it personally, to honor our best ideals, ideals that we have often professed but not always lived up to. It was an attempt to touch individual hearts, that each one of us has the responsibility to be the kind of people that we can be, and that will help make us the country that we can be. That was the purpose of it. But fate played a hand in the fact that while nobody was listening to this song until 9/11, when a television station started pairing it with a video montage and airing it through a regional network, and it got picked up by some other stations, a montage of the events of 9/11. And since then, many folks have discovered it and its inspirational message and helped carry that inspirational messages and patriotic events around the country on patriotic holidays. And I couldn't be happier about anything than that. But it wasn't a 9/11 piece. It was never designed that way. It was designed to carry a message that each one of us is really obligated to carry in our daily lives. So, as we remember this day, I would ask that you do a couple of things. I would ask that you go to YouTube or Google America My Home, or Anthem for the Millennium, which is its proper formal title, and listen and be inspired by the song yourself. Hopefully be inspired. And listen closely to the message. It's the ideals that we have professed and have not always lived up to. It's the very idea of America. The very idea that decent, moral, responsible people can govern their own affairs if left alone, and can do great things if they're afforded merely the opportunities. And in doing those great things, they can improve not only their own lot, but the lives of all around. That's the wonderful, beautiful idea. That's the real America. That's the real American dream. A dream that has been tarnished in our age of narcissism and self-indulgence and greed, especially. And it's a dream that's been tarnished before. Like I said, there are plenty of periods of our history where we can look at the injustices that we allowed, and we should rightfully hold our heads in some shame and some disappointment that we were not the America that we professed. It starts with each individual heart. That's where it starts. We can decide what matters. And I pray, I truly do pray, that whatever the outcome of this next election, and I fear it, either way, I pray that whatever the outcome, that we all take seriously, the need to form a more perfect union based on the ideals that we have always professed and all too often failed to live up to, and that we hold those things in our heart, that we hold the kind of values in our heart that will allow us to not only prosper ourselves, but usher in an age of prosperity and opportunity for all, so that we can be the kind of country we've always been capable of being. It starts with each and every one of us. It means our families will have to do a better job of staying together, of providing the nursery of good character in children. It means our businesses will have to be more responsible. We'll have to put well-being first. And of course, profits second, a spot of importance, but not first, not above the common good. Some things just simply have to matter, and if we don't make them matter, we are writing our own sentence, as it were. We will always pay a price for our shortcomings of character. Well, that's my spiel on it. I apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning of the program. I've been looking forward to this program for some time and really thinking very much about what I wanted to say, reflecting quite a bit. And so I'm sorry for the glitches that occurred. But if you're in the listening audience and you want to chime in on some of the topics that we've been talking about, if you have a question to ask, story you want to share, a point of view you want to get across, maybe you have some thoughts on the day and the remembrance that we make today, maybe you have some thoughts about character issues in general, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296, and I'm happy to take your call. Well, some things coming up, folks. I'm going to be taking off again on another professional workshop training tour. I'll be in Asheville, North Carolina this coming Wednesday, all day for a workshop there. And then I'll be traveling the next day on Thursday to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'll be doing an all-day workshop there. And then Friday of next week, I will be in the Nashville area in Brentwood, Tennessee, not only doing a workshop, but taping the workshop that will be converted into a video webinar for professionals. All about character disturbances and manipulation and how to intervene with such problems in an effective way. So we'll be doing that training, and then when I get back from that training, just the day after, I will be heading off again. My wife and I will be traveling to the Holy Land for a pilgrimage for 12 days. And during the Sunday that I will be on that trip, I'm likely not to have good internet access in some of the places that we will be going, and therefore you are likely to hear a pre-recorded program on that day. Most likely, you'll have a pre-recorded program that day, and I won't be able to take live calls. But today is different, so if you want to give us a call, and it doesn't have to be on the topic of 9/11, but I am curious about the thoughts that people have on this day. I talked to a lot of people during the week. Some who, interestingly, just basically want to forget the whole thing. And, there are some things that we do well not to forget. Not to gin up animosity. That's not the point. We don't remember these. There's a lot to remember about the events of that day, rather than some radical ideology wanted to inflict pain on us. There's a lesson to be learned there, for sure. I was having a conversation, an unsolicited conversation at a restaurant with someone who was making the point that within the Jewish religion, there had long-standing been the notion of Jews and Gentiles, with Gentiles being basically everybody else who didn't share the same faith. And there was even a time in history, and some folks probably still hold the same opinion, that to be a pure practicing person of the faith, you didn't even want to associate with those non-believers. And the person that was having the conversation with me said, I don't know of any other religion that thinks that. And I just looked incredulously at this person. Because to some degree, just about all religions do that, to some degree. Some worse than others. And these radical elements within Islam have the same feeling toward non-believers or infidels. And by definition, within those extreme frameworks, within those extremist ways of thinking, within that ideology, an infidel is by definition not an innocent. And there's no prohibition on mass killing of non-innocents. So this is the out for these radical thinkers. There was nobody innocent slain that day within such a warped ideology. Only non-believers, and of course they're guilty by the very fact of their non-belief. And in fact, there may have been, I'll need to research this. There may have been even some believers that were also slain. And of course, they would be regarded just as martyrs. It's amazing what kinds of twisted thinking we allow ourselves to engage in that justifies our brutality toward one another. It's just absolutely amazing. There's always an excuse we can find for our acts of brutality and violence. And it's a matter of the heart. And, one would wonder how a heart becomes so poisoned or toxic. They talk these days about radicalization, how a person comes to be radicalized, going on the internet and reading certain things and hearing certain things and dialoguing with certain folks and then quote unquote, becoming radicalized. But there's already an animosity churning in the hearts of these people who go searching for such stuff. Already a bitterness rooted in something. It's hearts and minds that we need to change. And that is a really arduous undertaking. To touch people's hearts and to convert their hearts is the only answer. It's not about converting them to coming over to your way of thinking or your religion, and then to hell with everybody else, or be damned everybody else. That's not what it is. It's about that never has done it, that never will do it, that will never be the answer. It's only the basis for war. It's only one of the principal causes of war and destruction. We can and we must do better than that. And it's all about character, and it has to start early. And that's why I've been writing about it for all these years in my books, In Sheep's Clothing, in my other book, Character Disturbance, my book, The Judas Syndrome, my book, How Did We End Up Here, with co-author Kathy Armistead, and what will likely be my last book, and one that I'm hoping to use the 10 hours of flight time that I have coming up to put the finishing touches on. My fifth and possibly last book, also with co-author Dr. Kathy Armistead, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life. The book that I have always wanted to write, and the book that so many folks have urged me to write. So many folks over the past 15 or 20 years have urged me to write. So I'm hoping to use the time in the air there'll be plenty of idle hours, and I hope to use the time to put the finishing touches on that. So wish me well on that, so that book has its launch date hastened, because it's already been delayed about 2.5 months. And I would surely like to get it out there. So, once again, if you have a question you want to ask, or you want to share a thought or two, just a general comment on the day or on the topics that we've been talking about, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. And I'm happy to take your call. Some other thoughts about this speaking tour that I've been on. I've been networking with a lot of different professionals all over the country. And I'm seeing a real eagerness to embrace some of the principles that I've been advancing. So one of the things I'm very hopeful of is that for the first time, I'm seeing evidence that more and more clinicians, more and more individuals in the mental health field are not only want to get it, but get it with respect to character disturbance as the phenomenon of our time, and wanting to be better prepared to deal with it, wanting to be better prepared to help relationship partners deal with the person in their lives that they know to be character disturbed in some way. Whether they're dealing with a full-blown narcissist or an antisocial personality, or maybe even someone who's on the psychopathic or sociopathic spectrum. Life can be a living hell when you're hooked up with such a person. And especially if you have to live or work with such a person. And so many times, unfortunately, victims in toxic relationships go seeking help only to find that they don't get the help they need, or even worse, to experience what we call therapy-induced trauma, where their manipulator is so good at the art of what we call impression management that they bamboozle the therapist, make a favorable impression, conceal their ugly side, so to speak, and then make the victim feel even more crazy. This can happen, and when it does, it's really damaging to the person who's already been through quite a bit of hell dealing with the disturbed character in their life. So it's really heartening to see so many folks at these training workshops really embracing the principles that I'm trying to advance. And so if you are a mental health professional and if you're wanting to attend, check out the schedule that's on my personal blog site at www.manipulative-people.com. Just go to the tab on the home page that leads you to the workshop page, and you'll find the schedule through the end of the year there. You can also go to the Cross Country Education website at crosscountryeducation.com. And you can search under the presenters' names. George Simon, search for George Simon's live seminars, and you will get 3 or 4 months worth of venues on the website there. So please avail yourself of either of those two sites if you're interested in coming to a workshop, or if you know someone who is interested in coming to a workshop, pass the information along. And as I mentioned before, these workshops are open to the general public, even though they are designed primarily for mental health professionals. Just be prepared to pay a steeper price than you would otherwise have to prepare, because there's a certain cost that is incurred with sponsoring agencies when they have to provide professional credentials, when they have to provide continuing education credits and go through all the rigmarole that you have to go through to provide those things. And to get appropriate facilities and whatnot, and to make sure all the appropriate equipment is there, et cetera, et cetera. So be prepared for a steeper price, but anyone can come to these workshops, and I'll be happy to answer questions from anyone, just as I answer questions from the professionals in the audience. So mosey on over to the Cross Country Education website, or to my personal blog site at manipulative-people.com, and avail yourself of the schedule. It's updated every few weeks, and you'll see where I'm going to be touring, and if you're in the area and want to come, happy to have you there. But it is edifying for me to find so many folks eager to embrace the principles that will really help with this problem. I've been really edified about that. And once again, if you want to join the conversation, feel free to give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to take your call. Well, once again, I want to come back to a little bit of discussion about this political season, and I want to talk just a little bit. I'm going to mention both candidates in an example here in just a minute. Both of the principal candidates. Of course, you know, we had one of the independent candidates reveal his lack of knowledge of the events going on in Aleppo, Syria. Matter of fact, he didn't even recognize the name right off the bat. Gary Johnson was being interviewed by Mike Barnacle, and he asked him about Aleppo, and in probably one of those embarrassing moments that any one of us would wish we'd never have, he asked the question, "What's Aleppo?" And Mike Barnacle replied, "You've got to be kidding." And he said, "No, I'm not kidding." He thought it was some kind of acronym for something, or he didn't even recognize the word, the name. He didn't recognize the word as the name of the city in Syria where so much carnage has taken place, where so many people have been displaced, where so many refugees have been created, a city that has lost well over 2/3 of its population, fleeing the ferocious fighting going on there. And it's interesting for me because it's going on in a region from which my ancestors came. It seems like that region in northern Syria and southern Turkey has been refugee central many, many different times in history. It's just amazing how some regions of the world have seen nothing but strife for so long, and how that strife has taken on both religious and other ideological tones throughout history. And it seems we never learn. We never really learn from that history, which is why we tend to repeat it. My heart goes out to those folks. I have some distant relatives who are still in the area, and who not too long ago felt safe enough to kind of come out from under the woodwork, out from under the shadows, and now they've gone back into hiding because they're so fearful of exposure. It's a sad, sad thing. We're in a war whether we like it or not. The war was declared before September 11th, 2001. That's just the day when such a big strike on our soil woke us up and told us what kind of trouble we were in. And I cringe a little bit when I hear the politicians say that this is the greatest threat that we face. That the greatest threat that we face is from radical Islamic terrorism. There's no question about the threat we face from that. No question about that. But the bigger threat comes from deeper within the human heart, in its capacity to shut down care and concern, its capacity to justify all manner of evil actions. And sometimes that heart is hardened by life experiences. So often that's the case. But what we're learning is that it isn't always a hurt heart that's willing to hurt others. It isn't always the case that a wounded soul is the soul willing to wound others. Sometimes it's the coddled soul. Sometimes it's the entitled soul. Sometimes it's the soul that's been afforded everything and has no gratitude for anything. That's also part of the message of the song you'll hear at the close. And I really urge you to either go onto YouTube and do a search for Anthem for the Millennium, or America, My Home, as it's more popularly known, or to visit my website or blog site and click on the link to it, or to Google, search it by its official name, Anthem for the Millennium, or its secondary subtitle, America, My Home. And listen carefully to the sentiment there. As imperfect a place as we are, we have some ideals that we profess that are worth revering. More than that, there are ideals that are worth living out. It's a shame, it is truly a shame, that we have not always lived up to those ideals and we haven't always lived them out. But there is a lot that we have to be grateful for, an awful lot. There are an awful lot of folks, still, I believe in my heart, the majority of folks, who have this internal moral compass and who want to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. They're the unsung heroes that go to work every day and do their part to make it all work. They're the folks that take their relationships seriously, that take their responsibilities as parents and guardians and guiders of those little hearts and minds under their care seriously. They're the folks that try to not only instill the right values in their children, but live them out themselves so that they provide a living example for their children. They don't just preach at their children, but they literally show them the way through their actions. There are these people out there, and they are the backbone, and always have been the backbone of America. And the more of these folks that there are, the more individuals of true character that there are, the greater as a country we will be, the stronger as a country we will be, and the more impervious we will be to the inevitable threats that we will always face. You cannot decimate totally the human spirit. It takes an awful lot. I guess you can do it. People have been broken before, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot to decimate the human spirit. And when we're strong in spirit, and we're of the right spirit, when we have the right heart, the right sentiment, everything else will flow. Everything else will follow. I pray, not just daily, but every moment, for this land that afforded my ancestors the opportunities, the freedom, especially the freedom from persecution, and the chance to lead a decent life that this country afforded. And I also pray for our weaknesses of character that have allowed us to do some horrible things, not only to others, but to our own, to various groups within our own ranks, groups, members of whom have even spilled blood for this land that we all profess to love, or that most of us profess to love. We must be about the business of changing hearts and minds, and we can only do that through example. I think, as a Christian, I think of the words of St. Francis, who said something analogous to this. I'm not sure of the exact quote. But he said to preach the good news all the time and everywhere. And if you have to, if you must, use words. And what he meant by that is that what we profess with our lips does not represent our faith. This is what I make the case for in the Judas Syndrome, my book, The Judas Syndrome. That's not what reveals the nature of our faith. We reveal the nature of our faith in how we conduct ourselves, in what we do. That's what will either credit us or indict us. But it certainly reflects a testament to the true nature of our faith. Our actions do, not our words. Talk as the old saying goes, is truly cheap. Anyone can talk a good line. I'm thinking of a Facebook post that I saw posted by some sanctimonious fundamentalist Christian, making the case that Mother Teresa, who was recently canonized, was no saint because she didn't adamantly insist or hold in her heart the necessity of those she helped. She didn't hold in her heart the necessity of them to believe exactly as she believed and to confess their embrace of Jesus as Lord and Savior. She urged them to be the best that they could be, and she did for them anyway. And for that, they said, or this post asserted, that she condemned herself. And so therefore, not only is she no saint, but despite all the works she did, she's burning in hell right now. It takes an awful lot of chutzpah. It takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of guts to be that sanctimonious. I mean, really, to trash Mother Teresa. That's not the kind of faith I'm talking about. That kind of faith is empty. You can preach your embrace to the high heavens, but you condemn yourself with your actions. Character matters. It matters more than anything. And on a day like today, we do well to remember that. We do well to remember what makes us great and what makes us strong. What will make us great and what will make us strong. And to do our best to do our part, each and every one of us, to make our families what they can be, and then in turn make our communities what they can be, and then in turn to make our business and our civic enterprises what they can be. Then we'll be great again. I'm Dr. George Simon. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week on another edition of Character. Take care.